Hello, Catherine. Do you have the intro queued up? 20 seconds. Jason Wallace. I'm the pastor of Christ Presbyterian Church, and we welcome you to another installment of the Ancient Paths. We apologize for our technical difficulties, and hopefully we will have them smoothed out from the rest, for the rest of the show. We're going to engage in a little bit of counter-programming tonight. We are going up against the president and his challenger as they debate who will make the best ruler for this country. A lot of folks are upset. A lot of folks are having a lot of indigestion because they look at the two main alternatives and they're not happy with either one of them. On the one hand is a man who seems to be committed to redistribution of wealth by his own admission, a man who is hostile to many of the founding principles of this country. We have, on the other hand, we have a man who worries people about a host of other issues. To hopefully give you a little bit better perspective on things, I want to remind you that neither one of those men is going to be our ultimate ruler, no matter who wins the election. That whoever wins that election is going to do so by the decree of God. And he will only rule and reign as long as God ordains it. God is the one who is sovereign over all things. And we have seen through a number of rulers and potential rulers judgment that has been poured out on this country as we have abandoned the faith of the scriptures for idols and for our own satisfaction of our flesh. God is judging us. Just as he gave Israel bad ruler after bad ruler after bad ruler, in Judah, there were a few good rulers, in between a whole lot of other bad rulers. It is God who raises up kings, and it is God who lays kings low. It is God who establishes empires, and it is God who destroys empires. The comfort that I hope to give you this evening is that there is absolutely nothing that either candidate can do apart from the will of our holy God. There are a set of Psalms that I think might be a comfort to you over the next month as we hear more and more fear-mongering. People are more easily motivated by a common enemy than they ever are by a common vision. You start trying to put forward a common vision, people figure out that they really aren't sold into it. But if you can scare people with all the different possibilities of this candidate or that candidate, you can motivate them to at least vote against that other person. And we have a system that we have apparently adopted in this country where we have two choices that either lead to bigger government this way or bigger government that way, either bigger social programs or a bigger military. A lot of folks are worried that no matter who gets in, this country is facing some very great dangers. If you know anything about economic history, we're not looking real good. We are running deficits in the neighborhood of $1.5 trillion. If unemployment in this country was counted the same way today as it was back under Nixon, our unemployment rate's about 16%. But Democrats and Republicans both have massaged the numbers. They don't count discouraged workers. They don't count workers who have gone to getting part-time jobs, trying to keep food on the table because their unemployment has run out. There's a lot of worry out there. But if you're a Christian, you shouldn't be worried. Yes, we need to be wise as serpents, but we need to be innocent as doves. We need to be aware of the things that are going on around us, because if we foolishly think that paper money is always going to be worth something, we're ignoring the lessons of every fiat money system that the world's ever known. At the same time, who's in charge? Psalms 93 through 100 focus on the kingship of Jehovah. The fact that God reigns. 3 of the Psalms begin with the statement, the Lord reigns. And that's what we're going to be looking at this evening, because whoever gets elected, you need to recognize it's not that God has abandoned us. It may be God's judgment on us. But if we're Christians, we have the promise in Romans 8:28 that God is working all things, not just some, but all things together for our good. And so all these worries, what's going to happen if the money collapses? What's going to happen when there's not food in the grocery stores? What's going to happen if this candidate gets in and pursues this kind of agenda? What happens if this candidate gets in and goes to war with the church? What happens? What happens? Reality is that most of the history of the church has been written in blood. So I'm not promising you peace and security. I'm not promising you that you can live in the village of morality, as Bunyan called it in Pilgrim's Progress, where you can live peaceably around respectable neighbors and have peace in this fallen world. Jesus called us to war. And yet at the same time, God says that even the hairs of our head are numbered. For some people, that's a bit of a more difficult task than it is on mine. But Jesus promised that not a sparrow falls outside the will of his Father. The problem that so many people have is that their God is too small. And he doesn't threaten them during times of peace, but he doesn't comfort them during times of trouble either. Psalms 93 through 100 will be a comfort to you as people are trying to make you fearful. As we see legitimate issues out there, there are going to be big issues regardless of who wins. And based on who wins, there are going to be issues. But who is the ultimate king? It's the Lord. So there are a couple of Psalms I want to look at in particular. Psalms 97 and Psalm 99. And hopefully we will see that with all the fear that's being marketed out there, that those who are right with God have nothing to fear. Those who aren't right with God, you have absolutely nothing on which to hold on. Your candidate may win. You may win the lottery. You may be the most popular person in your neighborhood. You may have your sons become doctors and your daughters all marry well. You can have everything going for you, but you're going to hell. And you're going to lose it all. Because the ultimate question is, who's on the Lord's side? Who has the Lord on their side? Because all the kings of this earth are as nothing before the true God, and we're going to see that. We're going to do something a little unusual because we're doing a bit of a survey this evening, and it's a bit of a special program in that we're going up against the presidential debate that's taking place this evening. But if you'd like to call in, go ahead and join in the conversation. The subject is the kingship of God. The phone number here is 801-973-TV20. That's 801-973-8820. And I hope that you will see that not only is this a comfort for those who are true Christians, but it is something that is scary. If you realize that the God you think that you have on your side is a fiction. If you realize that the God of the Bible is a whole lot different from the God that you think that you know. So we'll start with Psalm 97. The psalm begins just like Psalm 93, Psalm 99, here Psalm 97. The Lord reigns. That's the opening cry. In Psalm 100, it is a matter of rejoicing. All through these Psalms from 93 through 100, it is supposed to be a matter of rejoicing to God's people. God is the one who is in charge. He is the one who is reigning as the true king over everything. And so here, the Lord reigneth. I apologize, our regular producer's out, so we don't have some of the graphics that we would normally have. So I appreciate your patience this evening. The Lord reigneth. Let the earth rejoice. That's the cry over and over. When we recognize who's really in charge, the proper response is to rejoice. Let the multitude of isles be glad thereof. What's the option? We have a whole lot of people who think that, well, God's in charge except where it comes to my free will. Because I'm going to be God myself someday. Wrong. God is the one who is sovereign over everything. And since He is good and He is great, that is the best news that we could have. Because we're sinners. If we were in charge, we would mess things up. If you don't think that's true, look at whoever wins the lottery. Look whoever is given great power. Does it ever make them better? Gene Roddenberry was an ungodly man, but even he had the sense in the old Star Trek episodes to show what happens whatever power is given to human beings. They become monsters. The praise here is, it's the Lord who's in charge. Not Obama, not Romney, not Ahmadinejad, not any of these other people. None of them are the ones who are really in charge. The God of the Bible raises up kings and He can bring them out. He is the one by whose power every one of their hearts beats. When sinful men shake their fist against God, it's less than a flea shaking its fist at you. I mean, it's God's in charge, so be glad. Clouds and darkness are round about Him. Righteousness and judgment are the habitation of His throne. The picture here is reminiscent of Exodus 19:18 at Mount Sinai. We're told there that it was completely in smoke because the Lord descended upon it in fire. Its smoke ascended like smoke of a furnace, and the whole mountain quaked greatly. The very next verse says, a fire goes out before him and burns his enemies up round about. This is not a God who's afraid of sinful men. This is the God that in Psalm 2, when he sees all the kings and the great ones conspiring together against him, he laughs. So many people are worried about secret combinations, about conspiracies, and all these other things. Your God's way too small. Psalm 2, the God of the Bible laughs at those kings. He says, yet have I set my king upon my holy hill of Zion. I will declare the decree the Lord has said unto me. Thou art my son, today have I begotten thee. Ask of me, and I will give thee the nations as thine inheritance. Thou shalt rule them with a rod of iron. Thou shalt dash them in pieces like a potter's vessel. The psalm ends with, be wise, O kings. Be instructed, ye rulers of the earth. Kiss the Son, lest you perish from the way when his wrath is kindled but a little. The God of the Bible is a consuming fire. It's not just Old Testament, by the way. That's New Testament. Hebrews 12:29. Our God is a consuming fire. And it's not just a metaphor. When God descended there on Mount Sinai, he was surrounded by fire and smoke and darkness in the midst of all that fire and smoke. It's to show his holiness. When Nadab and Abihu, the sons of Aaron, offered worship contrary to what God had said he wanted, God didn't say, hey, I really appreciate you trying to be imaginative in bringing the arts into worship and expressing yourself. God also didn't say, hey, fellas, I very specifically told you this is how I was to be worshipped. We're told instead the fire of the Lord went out and consumed them. They became the incense. And as the bodies of his two beloved sons are laying there smoldering, stinking heaps, Moses tells Aaron that this is what the Lord meant when he said, I will be sanctified, I will be treated as holy by those who approach me. And Aaron was forbidden from mourning his sons because they were rebels. If you don't understand that, you don't understand God. In Deuteronomy 32:22, the Lord says there, for a fire is kindled by my anger and shall burn to the lowest hell. It shall consume the earth with her increase and set on fire the foundations of the mountains. We have pictures of God's judgment with fire. Nadab and Abihu, the 250 followers of Korah, Dathan, and Abiram. But our God is a consuming fire. It's not just something he can do, it's what he is. He's holy. And the reference there in Deuteronomy, it gets repeated all through the New Testament, that God's going to burn the whole world up. This is not a God who's wringing his hands, wondering how in the world he's going to make good things happen out of bad things. Franklin Graham, Billy Graham's son, was asked the question, where was God during Hurricane Katrina? And I was embarrassed by the answer. He said, God had nothing to do with Hurricane Katrina. Satan's the God of this world. No. The Lord reigns. Jesus, before his ascension, said, all authority has been given to me in heaven and on earth. Not just for some future 1,000 years, but now. Are we going to have trials? Of course we are. Are we going to have persecution? Of course we are. Is that a bad thing? I won't embarrass anyone on the air with this one. But if most statistics hold true, most of you think you can name the 10 Commandments. I challenge you. You don't have to do it word perfect. You don't have to do it in order. But can you name the 10 Commandments? Name them all. Write them down. Don't just say, oh yeah, I could do that. Sit down and actually take a piece of paper and try to write them out. And if you can't, then you really haven't been taught very well. Do you really take seriously that this is the God who reigns, the God who is the consuming fire, the God who destroyed Nadab and Abihu, who's going to destroy the whole world? That this is something that, metaphorically speaking, is written by the finger of God. Now, if He's on your side, you have nothing, absolutely nothing to worry about. The dollar bill can go the way of the Reichsmark. 1923, hyperinflation in Germany. It was cheaper to burn your money than it was to buy kindling with it. I made a gift to my kids. It cost me all of about $3. I bought them all a $100 trillion note from Zimbabwe. Back in 1971, I think it was, you could have bought the whole country for $100 trillion of Zimbabwean money. It was actually worth roughly about the same as U.S. money. When they came out with the $100 trillion note, it wouldn't buy a loaf of bread. May we see that in this country? Of course. In fact, if history is a guide, we're going to. Our money's going to become absolutely worthless, and they're going to reset it, and we're going to have some new money. It's either going to be based on something tangible, like gold or silver, or the government's going to put a gun to your head and say, this is now money and this is what you will take, or we will put you in prison, or we will take all your goods and give you these colorful pieces of paper in place of them. Are we going to have problems? Of course we are. When have we not had problems? But the promise that God has given is that He is working all things together for good. The promise that Jesus gives to His church is, lo, I am with you always. Are you upset over politics? You're not watching the debate tonight, apparently. I don't know, maybe it's gone off by now. Are you upset that whoever wins, you lose? Remember who's in charge. The Lord reigns. He's not one, He's the one we should worry about. If the Lord's on our side, we have absolutely no problem. The things that happen to us, they're for our good. There's no indication in the book of Genesis that Joseph was told, this is the biblical Joseph, the son of Israel. There's no indication that he was ever told what the end of his story was going to be. He is hated by his brothers. He's sold into slavery. His master's wife tries to seduce him when he is too honorable for that. He's thrown into prison. At no point are we, we're told the Lord was with him, but at no point are we told that Joseph knew the end of the story. Indication is he didn't. But from that prison, God elevates him to the second most powerful position in all the world. And that what his brothers meant for evil, God meant for good. See, God's not just sovereign over the nice things in life. God's sovereign even over the evil things. Joseph tells his brother, what you meant for evil, God meant for good. Were his brothers normally good, and God was dragging them kicking and screaming to make them do bad things to their brother? No. They did exactly what they wanted to do. If your God is too small for that, your God's not the God of the Bible. Peter tells the Pentecost audience there in Acts 2 that Jesus was delivered up according to the determined purpose and foreknowledge of God. The Lord reigns. So let's look some more at Psalm 97. His lightnings enlightened the world. The earth saw and trembled. The Greeks thought it was Zeus who was the master of the lightning bolt. Canaanites thought it was Baal. Israel knew who was really in charge. It wasn't these fictitious gods out there. It was the God of the Bible. The Lord, Jehovah, Yahweh. The hills melted like wax at the presence of the Lord. At the presence of the Lord of the whole earth. You know, you don't have to read a whole lot of the Bible before you begin to realize that when people say that God is an exalted man, they don't know how great God is. Their God is not that great, not that holy. The God of the Bible creates everything. It says the heavens declare his righteousness and all the people see his glory. I've said this a couple of times over the years, but I'll repeat at least a little bit of it. It's roughly 90 million miles from our planet to the sun. Light travels at roughly 137,000 miles per second. That's pretty fast. To the closest star, I think it's roughly 4 light years. Maybe getting that wrong. It's been a little while. But our sun and that star make up 2 of roughly 100 billion stars in the Milky Way galaxy. With current technology, there are roughly 10 billion to 100 billion galaxies that we can observe. And week before last, they announced that they found the furthest one yet, 13.2 billion light years away. Our God is not the God of just one little piece of that. Our God is the one before who holds all that in existence. This planet, this solar system, this galaxy is less than dust under his feet. And yet he is mindful of us. So many people want to make God so imminent that he's not threatening. Or they want to make him so transcendent that he's so far out there that we don't really have to worry about him paying attention to little old us. The God of the Bible is immanent and transcendent. He knows every thought of your heart. He knows the things that you hide even from yourself. He remembers the things that you try to forget. And yet he's not so imminent that we don't have to worry about him. This is the God before whom the earth melts. In Isaiah chapter 40, we have a God who is not the God of most people's understanding. I'm going to jump ahead for a moment here because of the context. In Psalm 99 it says, "The Lord reigneth, let the people tremble. He sitteth between the cherubim, let the earth be moved. The Lord is great in Zion, and he is high above all the people." the same sentiment. You see the same themes visited through each of these Psalms between 93 and 100. And you see it elsewhere in the Psalter, and you see it through the Old Testament. And I apologize that we don't have the graphic for this, but ask for your patience here. Isaiah 40, beginning at verse 15. It says there, "Behold, the nations are as a drop in the bucket." The nations. "And are counted as the small dust on the scale." Are you really worried when you're buying something if a tiny amount of dust gets on the scales? Does that really matter? That's the picture of the nations. People are crying and gnashing their teeth over the current political situation. If your God is the Lord, if you have been reconciled to Him through Jesus Christ, you're to be a faithful citizen. You're to make use of the means that God's appointed. But do you need to be afraid? Do you need to buy into all this fear-mongering? Do we need to go build ourselves a bunker up in northern Idaho and try to hide out until Jesus comes and saves us all? No. Back to Isaiah 40. "Look, He lifts up the isles as a very little thing. And Lebanon is not sufficient to burn, nor its beasts sufficient for a burnt offering." The picture here is of the nation of Lebanon with its great cedar trees, huge cedar trees. It's not enough to make a real offering to the Lord. All its wood, all its beasts are nothing. Verse 17 of Isaiah 40, "All nations before Him are as nothing. And they are counted by Him less than nothing and worthless." We need to be aware of the age in which we live. We need to be aware of crime. We need to be aware of the dangers of people breaking into your home, of civil unrest. We need to look at what's going on with the rest of the world right now and understand that we're not immune. But if our God is the Lord, if He's on our side, there's nothing we need fear. If He's not on our side, there's no comfort. Everything can go wonderfully for you in every other area, but you're doomed. You have the promise that God is not working all things together for your good. That in the end, hell is going to open up and swallow you forever. In this world, what is the worst that ungodly men can do to me? Just in case it hasn't been clear before, let me make myself a target. Muhammad was a false prophet. Muhammad is burning in hell. Muhammad was a pervert and a pedophile, and Muhammad was all kinds of nasty things. All you have to do is read what they say about him, those who love him. Those who follow Muhammad, they'll tell you he had over 700 Jews beheaded in front of him in one day, but hey, he's just supposed to be like Jesus. Jesus came to lay down his life. Does Jesus come back in judgment? Yes, he does. But there's a big difference between Jesus laying down his life and Muhammad killing 700 people, marrying an 8-year-old girl. Oh no, maybe I'm going to spark some violence from the religion of peace. What's the worst they can do to me? They can send me to heaven faster. Do I get concerned over these things? Of course I do. I'm supposed to be a shepherd of God's people. It's not something I would presume to pursue of myself. I believe the Lord has called me to it. It's a burden. But there's comfort in the midst of all the turmoil. Islam being on the rise, Europe being a spiritual wasteland, this country, the mainline denominations falling all over each other, trying to see who can become the closest to a Canaanite fertility cult, with homosexual pastors and goddess worship and all this other garbage. And we have the churches here that say, well, we don't support that. True, we're in the same denomination and we're not going to pursue any discipline against them, and we're going to all cooperate together and we're all going to stay in the same group. But hey, don't blame us for that, because we haven't gone that far yet. Anyway. So many people fear because they don't know who God is. Their God's too small. People are worried with all the politics. But if your God is the God of the Bible, all nations are as nothing before Him. If you'd like to join in the conversation this evening, the phone number here, 801-973-TV20. That's 801-973-8820. Go back to Psalm 97. Well, let me finish Isaiah 40. Sorry, I'm jumping around here. But it's similar themes. Isaiah 40, beginning at verse 18. To whom then will you liken God? Or what likeness will you compare to Him? The workman molds an image. The goldsmith overspreads it with gold, and the silversmith casts silver chains. Whoever is too impoverished for such a contribution chooses a tree that will not rot. He seeks for himself a skillful workman to prepare a carved image that will not totter. God says, to whom will you compare me? People make nice images. But their images are insanity. What's interesting here is that you have this picture of gold and silver, but if you're too poor, you at least go find a piece of wood that doesn't rot, because having a God who's rotting is not exactly real encouraging. I wish that the folks who go down and do their little shrine at on 7th South at supposedly the Mary apparition, they'd realize that, hey, when the wood that supposedly has this outline of something that looks something like the traditional presentation of Mary, that when it rots out, that God's showing you that you're really not understanding Him. I mean, number one, God says don't worship images. I mean, you're not supposed to be worshiping Mary anyway, but you're not supposed to be worshiping images. And when your God rots, that's pretty pitiful. It says here that they go out and they don't want one that totters. They want it. If your God's kind of wobbling from side to side, that may be fine for a hula girl on the dashboard, but that's not so cool for your God. God goes on to say, though, have you not known? Have you not heard? Has it not been told you from the beginning? Have you not understood from the foundations of the earth? It is He who sits above the circle of the earth, and its inhabitants are like grasshoppers. At the Bingham Canyon mine, those huge trucks can look like little tiny toys down at the bottom from up above, but that's nothing compared to how God sees us. He sits above the circle of the earth, and its inhabitants are like grasshoppers, who stretches out the heavens like a curtain and spreads them out like a tent to dwell in. The whole heavens. He's the one who stretches them out. He brings the princes to nothing. If you need more than Psalms 93 through 100, look at Isaiah 40. You're upset over politicians. You're upset that one wants to make government bigger faster, one wants to make government bigger slower, and our freedoms and other things seem to be going down the drain. We have a national debt that can never be repaid. Make sure they got this part straight. Everything else falls into place. He brings the princes to nothing. He makes the judges of the earth useless. Scarcely shall they be planted. Scarcely shall they be sown. Scarcely shall their stock take root in the earth. When he will also blow on them, and they will wither, and the whirlwind will take them away like stubble. To whom then will you liken me? Or to whom shall I be equal, says the Holy One. Lift up your eyes on high, and see who has created these things, who brings out their host by number, who calls them all by name, by the greatness of his might and the strength of his power. Not one is missing. The answer to this is supposed to be, to whom shall you compare the Lord? No one. There's one God. I love the line from Avengers. This woman's looking at Thor and Loki, and it's like, they're like gods. And Captain America says, there's one God, ma'am, and I don't think he dresses like that. We also know he's not a man. Jesus Christ is God become a man, but that's not the same as some pitiful little exalted man who can hurl thunderbolts. This God, he's the one who stretches out the heavens. He's the one who calls all their host, all the stars, all the galaxies by name, because he made them and he sustains them. It was Christ who did it. And for him, everything was created. Paul asked the question in Romans 8, if God be for us, who can be against us? The answer is supposed to be nobody. The answer here is supposed to be, to whom shall you liken me? It's nobody. Do you realize how pitiful it is to say, me? I'm going to be like that someday. The idea that you could be a Thor, or you could be the adopted child of this God. Which one is the better view of heaven? Do you think that if you get to be a Thor and you call yourself a god, I mean, even if it were true, that's nothing compared to this. You see, if your God is a Thor, you're not even really a theist. You're an atheist because you have no true God. It's not that your God isn't even, your God is not only a fiction, but your God is nothing compared to this God, before whom the mountains melt, the one who has spread out the heavens, who calls all their hosts by number, who's created them all. Well, let's go back to Psalm 97. Confounded be all they that serve graven images, that boast themselves of idols. Worship him, all ye gods. People love to take those statements out of context. See, it says there's gods. There must be gods that worship him. That's not what it's saying. We take all of Scripture together. We don't say, well, I'm going to choose this part and I'm going to say that it must contradict everything else because that's the way I understand it. You don't get to pick and choose. Either it stands totally or it falls totally. The picture here is that all the supposed gods of men, that they should be worshiping the true God because they're not anything. We're going to go ahead and go to our first call. We have with us first Dustin in Springville. Dustin, good to have you with us.
Hi. Just wanted to tell you how much I appreciate your message tonight. It really puts things in perspective. Sometimes we can kind of get caught up in our surroundings and things happening, and then I always have to go back to the scripture where you mentioned that God's in control. And we don't really have to worry about things as long as we're at one with God.
That's it.
I really appreciate that message.
Well, thank you so much. I appreciate the encouragement.
Yeah, and I really notice your humility. And thank you very much for being such an example for us.
Try to look past me to Christ. He's a much better example. But
now, I understand that, but it is refreshing to see such humility in you.
Well,
thank you very much.
Thank you. When you understand that apart from the grace of God, I would be burning in hell right now, and justly so. I am as much a monster as anyone who's ever walked this planet. But God had mercy, and He restrained that monster, that wicked heart. And then He gave me a new heart. He gave me the Holy Spirit. He gave me His Son. He laid my sins on Him and His righteousness on me. Not because I was a nice person. I'm not a nice person. Ask my wife. Right now, I'm a mess. But I'm a work in progress. I'm alive, but man, I got baggage. But humility, how can anybody see the God of the Bible and not be humble? Because He's great, He's powerful, and He is holy. Psalm 99, the Lord reigneth, let the people tremble. If you don't tremble either in fear, because you see how scary God is, understanding that you aren't reconciled to Him, or tremble in excitement, then your God really, even Christians are sinners and can forget these things, and sometimes we need to be reminded, but if you're not trembling before God, either in anticipation and excitement or out of fear, you're dealing with Santa Claus. But I'm looking on the screen here. It says that we have the same person back in, I'm not sure who we have online too here. I talked to Marilyn. I apologize. We're having all kinds of technical fun tonight. So now we're to Dustin in Springfield. Dustin, good to have you with us.
Hi, I just have one question for you.
Sure.
You said God's not a person, but
can you please? Whoa! Can you turn your?
Us as His own image.
Can you turn the TV down? I'm hearing echoes and I can't make out what you're saying. It's
it
distorting it.
Okay, so you said God's not a person, but He created us out of His own image. So can you explain to me how that works?
I did not say that God is not a person. I said that God is not a man. He's not an exalted man who has worked his...
Being a man and a person.
Okay. God is a spirit. He is a person. He is personal. He's not just some impersonal force. The prevalent view here in Utah is that God is a man who, through obedience to law, and this is straight out of Achieving the Celestial Marriage, through obedience to law, proved his worthiness for celestial exaltation.
So you're just saying basically that He doesn't have a body.
Yeah, when Solomon builds the temple in Jerusalem, he looks at this temple and he says, "The heavens of heavens cannot contain thee, how much less this house that I've built." If your God is a God like Zeus or Baal or some other exalted man, you can stack those kinds of gods up in Solomon's temple like cordwood.
Okay.
This God is immanent in His creation. He communicates with us. He fellowships with us, and yet He is beyond it all. So I hope that helps. Thank you.
Okay, thank you.
Sure thing. We'll try to go back to some calls in a moment here. It's funny, the first 50 minutes of the show we don't get any calls, and then we start getting a whole bunch at one time. Confounded, verse 7 of Psalm 97, confounded be all they that serve graven images. In the second commandment, in Exodus 20, God says that He will not hold him guiltless who makes a graven image. He will visit the iniquity of the fathers on the sons to the third and fourth generation of those that hate me. Those who are idolaters always think they love God. The people of Israel thought they loved God when they made that golden calf, and they were having a grand old time dancing around it. Moses is coming down from the mountain. Joshua says, "It's the sound of battle." He says, "No, it's not the sound of battle. It's the sound of a party." They thought they were having they thought God was going to be thrilled with having them worship a golden calf. God isn't happy. If we think that the God of the Bible can be reduced to a golden calf or to an exalted man, we don't know God. We've created something alien, something that is a blasphemy. In Romans 1, it says there, it says, verse 18, "For the wrath of God is revealed from heaven against all ungodliness and unrighteousness of men who hold the truth in unrighteousness, because that which may be known of God is manifest in them. For God has showed it unto them." Everybody knows there's a God. Michigan college professor stripped naked and was screaming with profanity that there was no God. He knows there's a God. He doesn't like the fact there is, but he knows there's a God. It's what makes him crazy. Verse 20, "For the invisible things of him from the creation of the world are clearly seen, being understood by the things that are made, even his eternal power and Godhead, so that they are without excuse. Because that when they knew God, they glorified him not as God, neither were thankful, but became vain in their imaginations. And their foolish heart was darkened. Professing themselves to be wise, they became fools, and changed the glory of the uncorruptible God into an image made like corruptible man, and four-footed beast, and creeping things, and all this other. But man, they tried to make God into a man. And that's the reason the wrath of God is revealed. That's the reason he gives them over to such uncleanness. Because they thought God was a man. There's a huge difference between the infinite, eternal God becoming a man to redeem us versus a man proving his worthiness to become a God. To whom? By what standard? It's insane. But let's press on in the few moments we have left here. Zion, verse 8 of Psalm 97, "Zion heard and was glad, and the daughters of Judah rejoiced because of thy judgments, O Lord." When you see all the insanity of ungodly men chewing their fingers because they're so enraged, take comfort. God reigns. Psalm 93, Psalm 97, Psalm 99. The Lord reigns. That's the opening line to every one of them, and it's the theme all the way through. God is the one who sits above the circle of the earth. God is the one who does what he wills. Jesus said, "Don't fear the ones who can kill the body. Fear the one who can throw body and soul into hell." The fear of the Lord is the beginning of wisdom, because the fear of the Lord drives out fear of everything else. That fear is not a trembling, cowering fear. It's described, Paul can say, knowing the terror of the Lord, we persuade men, to the Corinthians. But for those who've been reconciled, we see God is scary. God is holy. And that makes Christ all the more sweeter, because he died for a bunch of sinners like us who aren't holy and aren't great, who are creatures of dust and ashes, who've been perverted through sin. Jesus didn't come to lay down his life for, we'll get it worked out. Jesus didn't come to save good people, because there aren't any. He came to save sinners. And he came to save us not only from the guilt of sin, but from its power, and to make us a holy people. If seeing how holy and how powerful and how glorious God is, that the holy angels cover their faces. Remember, John sees the angel, he's tempted to worship him, and he says, whoa, stop, worship God. One angel killed all the firstborn of Egypt in a night. One angel killed 185,000 Assyrians. First thing that an angel has to say is, fear not, because that's the temptation. They worship God. They cover their faces in the presence of his holiness. And yet through Jesus Christ we've been reconciled. Well, we are near the end of our show here, and we would like to invite you to worship with us Sunday mornings at 11 a.m. The Lord's Day is a wonderful comfort for God's people as we are reminded what's real. The Lord commands us one day in 7 to lay aside our labors and to set aside the day to him, to worship him publicly and privately. And it's there we get reminded of what's real. He's real. This world's passing away. All the kingdoms of this world, they're not dust in the balance. God's church has faced all kinds of tribulation, from the Romans to the Nazis and everybody in between. God wins. We invite you to worship with us Sunday mornings at 11 a.m. at 8630 West, 2700 South. We have a Sunday evening Bible study at 5:30. We have a sister congregation, Berean Presbyterian, meets at 3350 Harrison Boulevard in Ogden at 9 a.m. And we also have work down in Utah County. If you would like more information on us, you can go to our website, christpres.net. You can see past episodes at ancientpaths.tv, and you can give us a phone call at 801-969-7948. We believe the Bible is the Word of God, and we worship Jesus Christ as our Lord and Savior. Till next time, we wish you the Lord's greatest blessings. The Lord bless you. Good night.